I feel like talking. One thing I realized in life is change always happens. No matter what, the most consistent thing you're gonna have is change. You think from a baby to a toddler to an adolescent to a teenager to an adult to a young adult to a senior. Change always happens. And one thing I always think about is when you was a child, you certain things that you did as a child, but when you got a little older, let's say when you was 2 years old, you didn't do when you was five, and when you was 5 years old, you wouldn't do when you was 8 years old. There was things that changed. There was things that took place in their life. But one thing I see around when you get to around the teenage years, sometimes we stop growing, we stop changing, we stop maturing, we stop making changes in our life. And sometimes we take those same behaviors from a teenager all the way to our senior years. One thing, the most consistent thing you should always do is change. Because think about it, if you was from 0 to 12, if you was 5 years old acting like you was 2, we would think there'd be a difference. We would think there would be something going on. There'd be some development challenges. But when we get to teenagers and young adults, we feel like, hey, I can act the same way. We should always be changing. Most consistent thing in your life should be changes. And inside of every change in your life, if it's from a teenager to a young adult, there should be always be development. There should always be growth in your life. One thing I realized also is the same thing God expects when we get saved. The way you got saved, you shouldn't be the same way 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There should be some development. How do I know that? The Bible talks about how when you should be a teacher, you now are still a student. When you should be eating meat, you now have to take milk. Why? Because he said, there was no development. There was no growth in your spiritual walk. There was no growth in your spirituality in the word of God and what God called you to be. There was no change. There was no transformation that took place. The most consistent thing you should always remember is that you gotta change and always change for to the better. Tomorrow, no matter what season you are in your life, no matter what season you are in your walk with God, develop in that season so the next season will be greater. I just feel like talking.